need to know about it.
No need to lie, how we keep it fly. I can clearly give 3 reasons why.
Yes.
No need to lie, how we keep it fly. I can clearly give 3 reasons why. Cook with the north, business on the south. If you from the mix, then you know what it's about. So we get up in the corn, zip up in the mouth. Feeding with them digits till we through the best of kind. We cook with the north, business in the south. If you from the mix, then you know what it's about. So we get up in the corn, zip up in the mouth. Feeding with them digits till we through the best of kind.
Yo.
Yes.
What's up, brother?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm so happy to finally get to talk with you, man. It's great.
It's just like seeing you on the YouTube channel. You look just the same. It's incredible.
That's awesome, man. Hey, I gotta tell you, like, you're a legend, bro. Like, I have to consider myself lucky, right? Because I've been listening to hip hop since I'm going to be turning 50 in January. And
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So I've been listening to hip hop since I was 13. And so I've been, it's like almost 4 decades of my life has been this music.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, to conceptualize that. That's something else. I never thought about it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So when I came across UK hip hop it's going to be 4 years in March, I think. I am so lucky, right? I'm so privileged. The fact it's kind of like you're done unwrapping your Christmas presents, and then you find that one that's tucked behind the tree, and it's like, holy shit! And it happens to be the best gift of them all, right? I mean, I have the privilege of listening to all of your guys' music all the way back for decades, right? So it's like this. It's so perfect. And so I was talking to my buddy Jake about you yesterday, because he's probably the biggest Cappo fan I've ever met.
Wow.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And he, because I wanted to kind of like get a different insight, and he said, until you get a chance to go back and listen to all of all of his music, stick with Canon, because and that's what I want to do today is because I know, I've listened to some of your older music, and it's dope, but I gotta tell you, man, this Canon album, I've only heard the first part, but it's just absolutely magnificent.
Thank you very much, man. That means a lot. Coming from somebody who, who studied the UK rap art form, and coming from somebody who has listened to my music previously, and commented on my music, it means it's a big deal, especially because you're not from here as well. To hear somebody's perspective from across the ocean, who has a different perspective on life, a different perspective on hip hop culture, and to be able to just chop it up with you and talk about it, it's great. It's refreshing.
Yeah. I understand that for sure. And it's funny because I was kind of introspective a little bit with it the other day, and I was thinking about just how I feel like I connect much more with the UK hip hop than I ever did. Because it's funny, because I still live in the same town, but I grew up in this small town in Canada, Ontario, and it's like an hour north of Toronto, which is I think it is the biggest city in Canada. So it's an hour north of Toronto, but for the longest part, it was like under 100,000 people. It was very small. When I moved here when I was 3, no, I was born here. Sorry, my parents, the house that we were in now I moved there when I was 3, but there's only 30,000 people here. So, when we were younger, and my buddies and I are walking around, rapping lyrics from NWA and stuff like that, and I think, we had no connection to that. We love the music, but how do we relate to that?
Yeah.
And now I feel like this is what I've always needed, always wanted. This is what I relate to. UK hip hop music touches me in such a different way, that it's this feels like it's always been my music.
Why is that, do you think? So you alluded to the fact that you're almost 50, you came across UK hip hop like the last Christmas present under the tree around about 5 years ago, half a decade ago. I'm coming from a similar. It's not the same thing. I mean, I won't claim that I'm a student of UK rap at all. I'm more of a student of American rap from all different areas. But I know what you mean when you talk about finding something after all this time and not expecting it. You know, it's that I think it might be something about our age. You know, that
Mm.
so we go through learning curves and eras in our lives. But I think when you get to 40s, or maybe it's the mid 40s, or it's for me it was around about 40 when I was yearning for something else. I knew I'd been yearning for something previously, but just grasping around in the dark for what it was. But then it's it's similar. I guess it's similar to somebody who watches a lot of films, and then they get to the end of their genre that's their favorite, and then they make the decision and they think, okay, well, I'm gonna go watch a Korean. If their genre is crime or psychological thriller, they'll think, well, I've watched all the Western versions of this. I know it in and out. So where do I go next? And then they come across maybe a Korean version of a crime thriller or psychological thriller, and it just opens up this whole other world. So it must be. I'm assuming there's similarities there. You know, I think we get to a certain age. I wouldn't just say it's men. I just say it's part of the human experience. We get to a certain age and then we just yearn for something something similar but slightly different. You know, maybe that's
Mm.
what you found in UK rap culture. You know, you just found that niche that was of interest for you, maybe.
Yeah, I mean that I never thought about it that way, but that's exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Because I think by the time I found UK hip hop, I was so disfranchised with American hip hop. Like I had no connection. There were a couple artists that I enjoyed, but for the most part, it's like I don't connect with this at all. And I found everything I listened to was, other than a couple artists, everything was 90s at that point. I went back to listen to Digital Underground, which is my favorite group. I went back to listening to them
Yeah,
because that meant, I guess there was a little bit of a connection because that was my childhood, right?
yeah,
But for the most part, I'd hear a new track that people were talking about, and I was like, I can't even get through the first minute of this song. It's like it just doesn't do it. Um, but for me, with UK hip hop, man, it's just like people send me a new artist I haven't heard of, and I always go in with an open mind, and then it's like, holy shit, like here's another guy that
yeah,
that just
yeah,
blows my mind, right? It's like a bottomless pit of great music that I could just keep finding, and people keep reminding me. It's like, dude, you haven't even scratched the surface. Like you have decades of music to listen to, right? And that's why
yeah,
that's why I consider myself privileged to be doing this now, because I get to I get to see artists progress too, right? Because you go, I came across the Four Owls was the very first artist I did, and then you go back and you get to see, listen to early Leaf and early BVA, and you see their progression, their maturity, right? You see all these artists
yeah, yeah.
growing, right? You kind of grow with them, which is cool. So
I guess there's a difference as well in UK rap culture as well, because there's a difference. If you're watching the trajectory of a popular artist in America, you're going to witness like a financial influx in their lives at some point. If they become popular to a certain scale, you're going to witness that leap from obscurity or underground status to commercial status, and then you can witness their negotiation of that process, and you can hear that perhaps in the like a transition or a transcendence from one thing and then to another, to a upper echelon perhaps, or a more commercial sounding
mm,
artist. Whereas I think here it's not so financially viable as an occupation. You know, there's a lot of other musical genres that the artist can adopt that will give them a little bit more financial freedom or less sporadic income. So I guess, yeah, you can. I haven't done it myself, but I guess you can map out a person's almost like their intellect or maturity, their levels of maturity in that way with UK rap artists, but you can't necessarily map out when was that moment when they emerged from an underground status to a more commercial or above ground status, because it doesn't often happen. You know, a lot of the artists from my ilk, we stay within that underground scene, either purposefully or we just can't find an angle as a way to access more commercial levels of acceptance or more audience, maybe.
Do you think, do you see a reason why that may be the case? Is it just because it's such a, you know, it's a small country perhaps? And I know you guys have a pretty wide reach into other parts of Europe. And you do have fans over here as well and in America, but can you put your finger on that pulse kind of idea of why what you guys do doesn't necessarily make that leap to what's, like, I don't want to say what's popular, but what tends to be commercially popular now doesn't mesh with what you guys create?
I mean, is it safe for me to say in some ways that I could be completely wrong? So this is coming from a very subjective angle. This is coming from a one person's perspective on the whole scene. And like I said earlier, you know, I am not an expert in UK rap or UK rap culture. I really follow American traditions in that way. I follow American artists, and I'm influenced by American artists. I'm rarely influenced by a UK rap artist who isn't. I'm influenced by certain aspects of UK rap culture, but it's more than likely in that commercial sense. You know, artists like Skepta or Stormzy or JME or the Newham Generals, or the people who are almost outside of my, what would be deemed my artistic medium, which would be, you know, traditional rap, I guess. But so I am influenced by artists like Little Sims or Dave, but they are far more in the public eye in England. Like, they are Glastonbury headlining artists. Those are the artists who I have a respect for, and I feel like there's a primacy to listen. Like, it's important to listen to those artists. Whereas artists of my ilk, like that kind of underground, I don't necessarily feel a need or an urge. I'm not compelled to listen to them, but I will listen to them. You know, I do have respect for the art form. But yeah, I'm very influenced in that way. But I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole. But what I was trying to say was something around, what was the question again? Sorry.
Well, just kind of like, can you kind of put your finger on the pulse of why it tends to, the underground
Yeah.
sound doesn't kind of become more commercial and popular?
I mean, it might be lyrical content. It's also like, I wrote a song a while back about trying to analyze why I don't listen to people in my same circles. And it's almost like looking in the mirror. And in some ways, you know, I don't like shining a light. I didn't like shining a light on my own artistry, because there's a lot of, you know, it's difficult to say. It's difficult to put a finger on it totally. But I think when you look at artists from the genre that I practice, you know, that underground, like the cliche is boom bap, that type of era. It's for some, you know, that for many of a purist nature in rap circles, that boom bap era of the 90s, you know, that we're from, you know, that's the greatest era. And so artists like us, we grew up with that era and we embrace that era. But things move on, you know, and I've always been an artist who accepts change, and I love to hear what younger artists are doing. That inspires me a lot. But yeah, maybe elements of success aren't there because of the tropes that we employ as artists, you know, like maybe we embrace the things that perhaps are more traditional and perhaps a little bit more safe, if that's you know, it's something that ideas and musical techniques that maybe have been tried and tested, and it feels a little bit more like, you know, this has already been accomplished. I want to pay homage to that era, so I'm going to come from directly from 1994. I'm going to sound like an artist from 98. You know, the beats are all going to sound like that. My rap verses are all going to sound like that. You know, and maybe it's unintentional sometimes. Maybe, you know, that's just where the artist comes from. That's the music they love, and so that's the music they make. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So maybe that's it. But looking from a subjective angle, I think maybe the commercial aspect isn't there. Perhaps it's purposeful in many ways. You know, a lot of the artists that I tend to hear, they tend to want to remain immersed in that idea of counterculture or being, you know, deliberately dysfunctional and against societal expectations, I suppose. And you know, there's a lot to do with that. You know, there's a lot to do with counterculture, and you know, from what I'm learning from close friends, you know, the UK is different from the US in many ways, but in a big way, the UK is different from the US because I don't want to go too deep on this because I don't really have I don't have a full, you know, conceptual understanding of this whole idea. But the idea is America's very much, I mean, I can only speak from my perspective and what I see or hear. So this might be completely wrong, but America's very much about race. Whereas over here, England is very much about class, you know, and maybe there's something to do with that as well. You know, maybe there's a societal assumption when they see rappers like me, or they see artists similar to me, and there's an assumption there, an immediate, almost like a split-second assumption where it's like, oh, I know that I can put them in a pocket straight away. They're trying to imitate an American tradition, so they're always kind of one step behind. You know, they're employing an art form that perhaps isn't theirs or that they are paying homage to, and so we're secondary in some ways. We're secondary to what is you know, paramount, and that's the American cultural tradition of rap music. Maybe that's one of the reasons why people from my ilk aren't as commercially successful as others, perhaps. But you know, they're thinking about it. There are a lot of what you deem UK rappers who have made financial success and they're popular on the scene in those ways. Depends on how you judge how you succeed in the music industry as well. It depends on what you judge is successful as well, doesn't it? You know, same for every occupation and every career. Depends on what you think is deemed successful. You know, is that financial or is that you know, is that quality of life? You know, is it am I successful because of how many units I've shifted and how many likes I've compiled, or am I successful because I may have moved somebody like you in Canada, you know, with my lyrical content, with perhaps my integrity or my honesty. I've moved somebody who I've never physically met. Is that what you deem success? You know, so I guess it's very subjective what I'm talking about.
I love that idea because it's the same thing kind of with me being a YouTuber, right? A lot of YouTube, what's considered success is subscriber count and views,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And in terms of being a reaction channel, my channel is very small. I only have 4.7K. You know, some artists get a lot of views. Some artists, you know, have trouble breaking 100 views. You know, but if I was to base my success on that alone, then I would say I had an unsuccessful channel, right? But through this channel, I've been to the UK twice.
Yeah, it depends
you
on
know,
what you deem as success, doesn't it? Yeah,
right.
you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
So
I met some great people. I get to interview people like you. You know, I've met a lot of artists who are now considered friends that I've sat down and ate with and And to me, that's success, right?
Yeah.
So
No, I very much agree with you. I was just going to ask, sorry to interrupt.
no, good.
I was just going to ask, from your perspective, coming from so far away, thousands of miles away, and looking in on this culture, on this aspect, this aspect of rap as a culture or hip hop culture in the UK, what's your ideas of reasoning behind perhaps artists can be deemed as financially unsuccessful, or, those elements of a lower audience, perhaps? What's your ideas behind that? What do you think is the main reason behind it?
Um, I'm two minds of it, because one, I kind of go back to what you were saying about looking in the mirror, right? I think over here, probably the closest artist that I know, that a conscious rap type of idea that became popular would be NF. He's just probably the closest one where he focused on, the troubles he was going through, the mental health. He talked about that, and he became, now he's commercially popular. He's selling out arenas, when before I saw him in a small little club that had 500 people in it. And now he's known worldwide. He's multi-millionaire or whatever. But I think for originally, a lot of people didn't like his sound, because it's like, well, I want to be entertained. I don't want to listen to somebody talk about their mental health, right? So I think there's a little bit of that. It's escapism. I want my music I want to put on music and I want to escape to it.
Yeah.
Which I get. There are times. I had two different UK playlists. I have one where I listen to in the car, and I have another one that I work out to, right? Those are two completely different things I want from those two playlists, right? And secondly, I think for the most part, I was gonna say something else there. Yeah, that escapism, and I think that that's the biggest one, is that. And secondly would be stuff like social media. I think a lot of people, especially younger people, they listen to what they're told to listen to, and a lot of that comes from like TikTok, for example. I've mentioned it a few times on my videos where I saw an interview. I can't remember what artist it was, but this artist said, like, listen, when you put out an album now, your record company will tell you need to have a song that they can water it down to 15 seconds, so they can put it on TikTok, and some kid over here will see it trending, and some stupid dance to it, or some trend, and you'll sell records because you have 15 seconds on TikTok, right?
Mhm.
And that's why you see some artists who, I don't understand their reach, or how they even, I won't call anybody up by name, but you see some of these artists that have tens of millions of views, and it sounds like a blender. Right? It's a bunch of nuts and bolts in a blender. It makes no sense how this person's even an artist, but because they have the ability to have a beat that's produced by 15 people, enough to water it down to TikTok and Instagram and all that kind of shit, to make that connection with the youth, and then they're told this person's popular, this person's a good artist, and they just go with it, and they don't take that opportunity to expand. I have two daughters that are, well, one daughter is just over 20 now, but I have a 17-year-old daughter, and everything she listens to, she gets from TikTok, right? And it's not, and they don't buy albums anymore. They buy songs, or they have Apple Music or Spotify, and they're like, okay, well, I heard this song on TikTok, so I'll add that to my library.
Yeah.
The days of putting in an album and or going to the record store and buying an album because you've heard one song on the radio, and then you listen to the story the artist is basically telling from beginning to end, that's almost gone now, right? If you're an artist, you're a popular artist now, you need one song to hit in the States, and next thing you know, you're in a video with a stack of money stuck to your head because they hand out so much money for these people, right? But so I think that's what it is. It's that social media's influence, the lack of attention span that our youth has, that our culture has, and yeah, and just the idea that I have enough trouble in my life, I want to escape that. I'm like that way in movies, right? I'm a huge movie guy, and kind of going back to what you were saying before about movies is I'm kind of I find that I'm going back to older movies. Like we sat down and watched Superbad the other day, um, because we just wanted something that felt safe, something that felt, that we knew that we loved and enjoyed and laughed our ass off. We wanted that because so much stuff now is just disappointing. You spend money to watch it. I don't know. It's just because a lot of that is you don't have that escapism anymore, right? Because a lot of it has social commentary in it. There's messages in the movie. There's no message in Superbad, right? It's just funny. It's you want to be entertained for 2.5 hours or 2 hours, and that's that escapism. So I think a lot of UK hip hop, I find there is a lot of that looking in the mirror. There is a lot of that. I could connect to what that artist is saying, even if you're saying something and I interpret it my own way, but it has that meaning to me where I can say, he's talking about this, and I can feel that. I can be like, yeah, man, I feel that way too at times. I know exactly how Cappo is feeling right now, and maybe it's not what you meant with it, but that's what matters, right? And I think that's what it is for me anyway. I think that causes that disconnect with commercial success and having the smaller success, or however it is you want to define success. But
Yeah,
but
definitely.
building upon that, I want to talk about Canon because
Yes.
I've heard you on Blade talking about it, and how, to me, so Canon, as a little bit of a comic book geek and a writer myself, Canon to me basically means that, a true story. You really can't mess with canon, right? Like, your canon is your story. That's how you got to be Cappo now. You got to be. Is that kind of how you looked at it? As this is my true story. This is me, or how did you come up with that?
I think the title canon, it plays on several different ideas of the word. There's different ways you can read canon, but what I was trying to get at, yeah, it definitely relates to story and narrative. But there's an idea of a historical canon in literature where you've got this kind of imaginary shelf of texts that last the test of time. And in the same way, you can have musical canons where you have a historical shelf of albums, perhaps from different genres that are canonical, that make up, that people assume that when you listen to them, you're going to get the rounded view, the full perspective of that genre or that way of life. And yeah, so that, I guess that links in with what you were saying about trying to tell, a holistic or a whole story of an individual's life. But yeah, in my early 30s, I went back to university to follow a passion around literature and creative writing. So I still had passion, and I was still in love with music, but I was trying to explore different. You know how we were talking earlier about, you get to a certain age, you want to find something else in life. Sometimes you want to discover something else. So I discovered literature. So I did a lot of reading of different authors and found out a lot about myself through that, and took that academic process through to doctorate level. So the past 5 years I've been studying this doctorate, which merged my newfound passion for academia and literature, but then it merged with almost my innate sense of music, or my inherent love of music. So I leaned upon both of those things. And I think, you know, it took a good 3 or 4 years of the process of the PhD for me to start to really realize that I'm able to articulate these ideas about myself and really understand who I am. I think that comes with maturity as well, you know, like being mid-40s, that comes with that idea of maturity, or almost an obligation that you should be, like Blade put it. He recently messaged me and talked about self-awareness. This idea, you know, that of self-awareness is the only way you can have a capacity for change, or you can progress, if you can reflect and you can be aware of what you're doing and why you're doing those things. So I think over the past couple of years in particular, I've got that. Hopefully, I've got a sense of self now and awareness, and I wanted to be able to articulate that concisely in one product. And at the time, I was going through this transitional period in my life where I was finalizing this doctorate, which consisted of critical chapters studying American rap artists. But the other component of the PhD is like a creative component, which is a trilogy of LPs that will be released next year. But in the time between that, I was finalizing things, and that's when Kong the Artisan contacted me, the producer who produced the whole album of Canon. And he contacted me with this idea about a project. And in the beginning, I was quite wary because I'm reasonably aloof as an artist. You know, I tend to keep myself to myself, often to my own detriment. But that's my lane. I just stick in that lane. And, you know, I'm not entirely sure what the main reasons are, but mostly for safety or comfort. I don't know. But yeah, so I was approached about this album. I had a few conversations with Kong, and we started to build up this creative relationship that I felt strongly about. And I wanted to get to a point where I was honest, and I wanted to really build a relationship with a record label like I hadn't done before, because of that aloofness that I referred to previously. So, you know, I put effort into this album like I haven't put effort into others. You know, artistically, I put in the same amount of effort into all projects that I work on, especially long form projects. You know, to me, if I equate the epitome of the art form of music, the epitome, the archetypal framework of a piece of music is the album. You know, over 10 tracks that speaks to society, that sees the bigger picture, that talks about the human condition, that opens up elements of self, and that you know that people can relate to for perhaps, you know, 40 minutes to an hour. That's the movement. That's the thing that I've always resonated with, and that's the thing we've grown up with. It might be different going forward for the younger generations, but I equate the epitome of a musical piece to the album, just like I equate the epitome of an author's task to write a novel. You know, there's a certain amount of words that kind of verify the length of a novel. And, you know, that's, to me, if I was an author, that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to make at least one novel that depicts me, or depicts a character based around something that I understand and that I know. And it's that idea, going back to what you were talking about that what conjures up in your mind when you hear or see the word canon. It's that idea of storytelling, passing down stories. There's a lot of people who just have a compelling sense where they need to get something off their chest artistically. You know, that you could be an artist, you could be a painter, you could be a graphic novelist, you could be a poet, you could be a dancer. You know, all of the creative industries, there's these mediums or these formats that I think lots of people kind of look at as being the paramount vision for that medium. Mine is the album. So when I was thinking about Canon, I was putting all those things that I've previously had in place, where I've worked hard artistically on a piece of music, and then I've kind of sent it out there. Like, you know, there's that cliche idea of sending out your newborn baby and giving it to people, and then just letting them deal with it, you know, because that's what I think is the true aspect of an artist. Or you know, if you can do that, if you can release your music and leave it be, to let other people tear it apart, or let other people digest it, or let other people look after it or nurture it or whatever. I think that's the true gift that an artist can give. But for this project, I knew that I had to promote it as much as possible. You know, after I'd given it away, I wanted to still emphasize the value in the project, because I started to get this sense that objectively looking from the outside on projects that I'd released, it's like, well, you can't, you know, some people just need to be told several times about a project. You know, some people need to see it and hear the artist talk about it and talk about how important it is to them or to the time that it's being released. And that's what I'm trying to do now, you know. So I'm trying to step out of the comfort zone or the woodwork in some ways and just talk about it, you know, just talk about the album and what it means to me. So it links in a way to what you were talking about before, that idea of escapism. You know, I'm not sure whether you know, but I think you know that the album is in 3 parts. But the first, so it's set in 3 EPs almost, and we equate them to chapters. You know, on the Canon album, we equate them to chapters because Canon as a title tries to link with this new academic passion that I have for literature, you know, the reading element and poetry and creative writing, and how I'm trying to merge and speak upon authors and take their words and utilize them in my lyrics as often as possible. So it's the whole album tries to speak as a novel in a way. One of the ways that Kong the Artisan kind of pulled out, or the threads of the album, were these 3 chapters, these 3 main themes that I spoke about. And those are, the first chapter is pain. So it's my artistic expression of different forms of pain. So and how I'm dealing with them, and also ideas around latent trauma, you know, like trauma that is felt like an echo from the past, and how I deal with them, and how people like me perhaps deal with them, or my perception of how pain is dealt with. But the second part is something that you've been referring to several times whilst we've been talking, which is that idea of escapism. So using music or using art as a medium of escape. A lot of people do it, you know, like we were talking about film in particular. You know, sometimes you just want to switch something on and switch off for 2 hours. Other times you might want to listen to something and really get to grips with it intellectually, you know, or just really get cerebral and really get thoughtful. And that's a form of escape in some ways as well, you know, as long as you're not looking too much in the mirror in relation to what you're doing. Yeah, but so the second part of the album, it deals with that. It articulates how people use different methods of escapism to escape that pain that they perhaps can't face up to at the time, you know. And one of the things that I've been trying to emphasize is how often I've used music, I've leaned on music in the past when I've been in that foxhole mentality, when I've been going through that bunker mentality where it's kind of me against the world, that elements of mental health decline in my life, where I'm kind of surrounded by my own thoughts, or I'm in that place that I can't necessarily climb out of at the time. Music has always been the thing that I've always been able to rely on, and I'm assuming, you know, it might be similar for you, but you know, and often is the case when I'm in that state, then I'll listen to a piece of music repeatedly, you know, something, and I'll obsess over that one track because it puts me in the right place, and it puts me in the mind state that I need to be. And so I tried to write elements of, especially the pain chapter, the initial chapter of Canon, where I tried to write with that in mind, just thinking, you know, maybe somebody could take this track and just keep it on repeat, and maybe they could use it as a form of therapy, or it might have medicinal purposes, cathartic purposes for them, where they can use it to heal. And then, so just to summarize, so you've got pain as the first chapter, that idea of how people deal with pain using escapism as the second chapter, especially in relation to music. But then the third chapter, I think, is something that Kong the Artisan picked up more than I could, you know, because when you're in the process of making a piece of art, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, so to speak. So I couldn't see these themes being that Kong the artisan could notice when he was listening to the music for the first time. He could read these three themes clearly, whereas I couldn't see them. But the third theme that he really picked out was this idea of, after I'd spoken on all of these subject matters, there were songs that had started to emerge where it sounded like I was resolved. I was finding a resolution to these issues that I'd been speaking upon. And so there's this idea of artistic maturity, of this, coming from a masculine mind state, that idea of maturity as a perhaps a middle-aged man in England, in the Midlands. How do you come to terms with issues of pain, and when do you stop and think, you know what, all I'm doing is trying to escape from this thing, I need to face up to it? And that's the third part of the album, is kind of envelopes that idea of resolving things, maybe looking in the mirror, and finding resolution. And so that the third chapter of the album is Absolution, where you come to terms with things and you learn from previous mistakes and you face up to those issues. So yeah, it Canon very much has a clear linear narrative like I've never put into a record before, and it's definitely informed by the PhD studies and my extensive reading, of novels and authors and critical chapters, where you just start to pick out a narrative arc. And I felt like it was important, and Kong the Artisan in particular, found that narrative arc that we could run with, and that we could use as a way of talking about the album.
It's great that you said that, because when I saw the names, the three names, I talked to my wife about it, and I said, like, I heard All Pain, but I hadn't heard the other two. And I explained to her what those three titles mean to me, and it's pretty much exactly how you described it.
That's amazing. So, that's good. Yeah, I'm glad.
I guess we should start calling you Dr. Cappo then, if that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah. It feels slightly awkward, but yeah, I'm proud of the fact that I went through the process. It's a big deal to me to go through the process, and I think it was definitely a learning curve for me as well. The whole academic process has opened up new windows of understanding about myself in particular. Just that idea again of self-awareness. I feel blessed to be able to have had those experiences in order to put me in this place that I am now.
How difficult was it? Because I know myself, like, if I have to do training at work and it's online or whatever, I find that I'm so detached from those days. I am 20 plus years away from college, so I find that my level of attention, my attention span, like I couldn't imagine sitting in a college chair again and having to learn 8 hours a day. Like, how difficult was that for you?
It's a lot of people's when writing a thesis, it can be an alienating, quite an isolating experience, because what you got to do a lot of reading. So you're in the minds of other people, but you're not necessarily speaking to other people. You're doing a lot of reading, going away, kind of honing yourself and honing your knowledge of a very niche, narrow subject matter. So yeah, that part of it is something I could deal with, because I've always been reasonably aloof anyway, just kind of kept myself to myself. So especially in relation to my art. But the process of learning to me is a gift. So every day, I'm always thankful that I learn something new every day. I'm not a person who, I don't want to stop learning. I want to always have, it feels like a privilege to learn something. And sometimes that can be overwhelming, because at times you can think, when it comes to music itself, in the past, I felt reasonably comfortable that I'm knowledgeable about music, but I am not. It I am not knowledgeable about music or music genres, even about the genre that I practice within. I still have a hell of a lot to learn, and coming to terms with that is something in itself. But yeah, I feel privileged to have the opportunity to learn every day, and so now, you know, part of the third chapter, Absolution of Canon, there's a track that me and another Nottingham legendary artist called Scorsese, we feature on it, and I sent him the track reasonably early on. The track's called Difference, and it just speaks about that idea of, you know, when you come to a point of maturity and you start understanding things about yourself, that you almost, so for some, there's an obligation to give back. You know, there's an obligation to pass on knowledge. And so yeah, the third chapter deals with that, you know, that sense of, look, if I'm learning and I feel privileged to learn, I want to give that back to perhaps younger generations, or to perhaps anybody who wants to listen. I want to give something. I want to pass on knowledge in as pure a form as possible, you know, an unadulterated form that perhaps doesn't involve my personality or me pushing my ideas onto you. I want to present I want to present a perspective of somebody's life, a working class male from the Midlands, with as little prejudice or, you know, preconceived assumptions as possible. I just want to pass it to you in as raw and as honest form as possible. I know it's going to have, you know, all elements of art will have stigmas and stereotypes attached, but I tried to be as honest as possible with it, and just tried to speak as holistically as possible, and just give as much of myself and my understanding of life as I could. And, you know, tracks like Difference, I think they really do, you know, if you have the time to listen, it sums up that idea of being our age. And just, you know, that me as an individual, I feel like whenever I get the chance, I jump on trying to learn again, you know, something new. I'm interested in it. But then at the same time, I'm just as passionate about passing down something that I already know to somebody who's willing to listen. You know, it's a big deal for me.
There's a couple of things I want to touch on what you said, but bringing up Scorsese, I want to talk about the fact that you brought on mids, which I've been bumping mids, man, like crazy. I love that track. So, and Anger as well. I love that.
That's dope. Thank you.
But bringing on Juggernaut, and I hate that I don't remember the name. The second,
Savage.
yes, sorry, yeah, I
Yeah,
wrote it
no
down now. I
problem.
can't see it, but the fact that they're both from the Midlands, was that important for you to get? Because I find Juggernaut, that was the first time here in the second cap, but I've heard Juggernaut before, and I have a great respect for him as an artist as well. But he's yet another one of those guys that seems to just kind of fly under the radar. Not a whole lot of people. He's criminally underrated in my my assessment. So how important was it to have artists like these in Scorsese on the album with you?
Yeah, it was hugely important, because as the project developed, it became apparent that as part of the project, I wanted to show artistic maturity, and one of the ways that I hopefully successfully showed that was by being open, far more open to collaboration than I had been in the past. So whereas in the past I'd try and undertake a project like an LP exclusively, you know, I try and solidly attack the project from a solo artist perspective. Whereas this project, I knew that I needed to rely on others to bring their perspectives onto the project for it, in order for it to work, you know, to function properly. I needed that idea of collaboration. So going back to the third chapter just for a second, there's a track called Abundance Mentality, which is a concept that I learned a couple of years back when I was going through that kind of bunker mentality, where abundance, the concept of thinking about things in abundance is that, you know, whereas in the past I might want to just have everything exclusively for myself and take all of the precedent and proceeds for myself, the abundance mentality speaks to that idea that, you know, if as long as you're giving, then you will receive. There's an abundance of what is needed, whether that's wisdom, whether that's whatever else you're chasing. You just have to open up your mind into thinking, rather than taking everything just for the self. Like, giving is reciprocal. So yeah, going back to a track like Mids and the collaborative process, one of the things that became apparent after a lot of my lyrics were created was this idea that I needed to reach out to people. And I started to reach out to people who I was familiar with. So I spoke to, good close friends in Nottingham who I hold in high esteem for their wisdom and just their characters in Nottingham, their personalities and their status in Nottingham. So I reached out to close friends like Midnight and Ruckus Regardless, and I asked them. I tried to change the format of what I would normally do when I reached out to an artist. So for some artists on the album, I just asked them for their perspective on life. I played them the track that I'd like them to feature on, and then I just asked them to be as spontaneous as possible and just speak upon the subject matter that I was speaking on. So for some collaborations in that way, it was as organic as possible. But with Jugs and Vandal, I've worked with them for over a decade, and we have this really cohesive artistic process where we work, and we've honed our craft together, and I have a great deal of respect for both of those artists as well. In particular, like you say, Jugs really up there lyrically in Knots and in the UK. But Vandal in particular, I've heard some of his new work. His new work is unbelievably like raw, and it represents Knots to a level, like to an unprecedented level, that a lot of the artists that we were talking about earlier, from this UK rap genre, it doesn't equate. Our music doesn't equate to what Vandal's doing. He's on another level, and the artists that he's working with, they're on another level. So that's something to look out for and look forward to in 2024. It's just that real place that they're coming from is I'm jealous of the work that they're doing because of that. That is something that I can't reach. But yeah, what became apparent after a while of reaching out is I was reaching out to people from the Midlands in particular, and then I started to realize, the project as a whole, the narrative arc, speaks from this perspective from the Midlands. And so then I wanted to employ just strictly voices from either the Midlands or up north, because in some ways from the era that I come from, there's always been an element of London. An element of London-centric, kind of London getting the spotlight in a way. I completely understand. London is a thriving capital city, and it has an abundance of great artists there. So I completely understand, that a lot of the time when an artist from outside of the UK here's a rap artist, they respond to the London accent. But there's a lot going on outside of there. And so in my small way, I wanted to focus on the Midlands and the North in particular, to try and find those accents and find those perspectives on life. So that's why, I reached out to Scores in particular, and people from Nottingham. So I got Ari, who's a poet, to speak, who has a Nottingham accent. She was really kind enough to write a piece, and a good friend called Ramisha Rafiq, who is a postgraduate researcher who's a poet from Nottingham. And again, just bringing in those new Midlands accents and those voices and that new artistic perspective. But, bringing in Scores, Midnight, Ruckus, and then asking Juggernaut and Vandal to collaborate as well. So we can really emphasize that idea of it being Midland centric and based around the Midlands, but then also looking outside of the Midlands and up north. So then asking, somebody as prolific and an artist like Lee Scott to feature on that album, getting the gift of his feature on there, and then getting the gift of Connie Khan from Manchester. So you got voices that don't necessarily equate to what is the stereotype of UK of rap music in the UK, and it's just to raise that awareness, to just raise that level, that volume of those voices, and hopefully the album will carry that message throughout. You know, it's getting a lot of positive feedback from places, you know, and so, you know, that's important. But at the same time, in a way, I don't, you know, I wouldn't like the album to just champion kind of us against them mentality, you know, that idea of Midlands versus the South or something like that. I think it's a way of just readdressing the balance, in a way, the artistic balance. But as well as that, you know, I don't think I'm prioritizing the Midlands. It's where a lot of us, of the artists who are on the album, it's where we come from. So we can only speak about those things. And so we're trying to bring our unique perspective onto those canvases. We're artists and painters, and we're painting these canvases, and we're being as honest as possible and just painting where we're from. So somebody like you or somebody from across different places can have a taste of that, I guess.
Yeah, I think what really comes across is kind of on that mids track is kind of what you said, that you can really feel, especially the way that the track is done with the back and forth, and it really has that feel that these are three guys that know each other, have worked together.
Yeah.
And it just has that feel, right? Sometimes when you have an artist that features on a track, it's a great track, but you realize that this is just a feature. Right? And that track doesn't feel that way. It feels different.
Yeah. Thank you.
I want to get back to Kong the Artisan for a moment. I had a question written down, and you kind of touched based on it, because I've always it always interests me how an album comes together, and the fact that you said that Kong reached out to you with this concept. Now, did you work with him in the past on other projects, and then?
No. So he reached out to me out of an awareness that I was an artist from an era that he really respected, but also, you know, his label, Nolan Poland Records, he really wants to champion artists who have come from a different era but are still prominent now and still trying to be as prolific as possible. So and he has, you know, a real focus and an understanding of that underground mentality as well. So yeah, you know, I hadn't worked with him in the past, and so I was wary, you know, at times when you don't know somebody and they approach you, you know, you've got to go through that process of give and take, where it's like asking a question here, how are they going to react to that? But that whole journey with Kong has been a real eye-opener, especially because I'm now in that more mature mind state where I want things to work more now. You know, I want to create that, to build strong relationships, you know, creative relationships with people. So yeah, I had one mind on that side of things where I'm thinking, you know what, I want to make this a success. But then also, you know, when you're giving something, when you're trying to tell a story, or you're trying to speak about your vulnerabilities, there's always that worry in the back of your mind that when you give over that music or those lyrics, you know, maybe you might get burned. You know, somebody might take it away and misconstrue it, or make it problematic without your consent. But that's never in Kong the Artisan's intentions, you know. And I've said to him in the past, and I don't mind saying it to you, you know, without his guidance, his input, and his creative, you know, positive feedback on the project as well, it never would have existed. You know, a project like Canon wouldn't have existed. I mean, you know, that's down to the quality of the release. You know, it's out of my hands to be able to have done this whole project on my own. You know, I think it's difficult for people to realize how much goes into a musical project outside of the lyrical content or the musical content. So for me, as an individual, it's been of course it's been a process of trying to drill deep and find something original and something substantial to say that really can cross the oceans, that speaks upon the universal elements of the universal human condition without localizing myself too much and speaking on subject matters that we can all perhaps universally relate to. But having said that, you know, outside of that, the process has been reasonably smooth sailing for me, you know, because a lot of the hard tasks and the questions regarding themes for the album, track listings for the album, how we're going to get it designed, etc., all of those things were out of my hands, and I could trust in someone that could bring that to fruition. And Kong the Artisan is that guy. So I can't speak of him highly enough, really. You know, it's been a revelatory process from start to finish. And, you know, recently receiving one of the LPs and just seeing the quality of it and just feeling objectively, just knowing that it's, you know, it's a massive part of my musical collection. You know, it's one of the projects, if not one of the, you know, the project that's up there that really consolidates my sentiment as an artist, as a person. You know, it's as honest as it can be. It's coming from a place that's very contemporary and that I feel is still relevant to me. You know, so it's a big deal. The project is a big deal for me. You know, and I can honestly say there's maybe 10, 15 times in the journey to make this project where if it wasn't for Con being able to steer the ship, it never would have come to fruition, you know.
Well,
Even with my best intentions, it just wouldn't have been able to happen. So I can't speak of him highly enough. You know, he made it happen.
it it helps too that the beats are just absolutely just bonkers too. There's so many great beats.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that's all coming from him. You know, so all of that was taken away, all of that pressure and, you know, artistic requirement, I was not needed, you know. So he gave me canvases that I was able to run along, you know. He gave me open fields to run through, and that's not easy. You know, that's overlooked. That can be easily overlooked, you know, the amount of input he's had. And the person who I know, that the guy Kong the Artisan, very, very kind of, you know, he won't accept all of what I'm saying. He'll be like, oh, no. He won't accept all of it. But he does a lot. He does a lot. I think he knows deep down, but you'd have to ask him yourself.
And I think kind of another thing you touch on there is earlier in the interview you mentioned about the maturity, right, of getting to that age and maturing, and that shows how you've matured as well in that ability to, because you talked about as an artist handing it out to the world, this baby, and say, okay, do with it what you wish. And now you've matured in a way where you're trusting Kong, and you say, okay, here's my baby. It's up to you now to create something, and that's part of the maturity and the growth as well. You can see that.
Yeah. I sent him songs in batches, and each time I'd send them off, implicitly in the back of my head, I'd be just hoping that what he came back with would be something that I'd be happy with, you know. And that is I think if you asked many artists who are in working with producers, that's the main thing you can wish for, is that when you send your words off, that's the core of your craft. And if they are mishandled, that can become such a problem in the creative journey. Whereas, you know, that was always of high priority. And I have to shout out Kurt Cataract as well, the engineer for the project, you know, because he came through solid each time as well, just enhancing the levels of the tracks each time. So it became, after sending off maybe 8 tracks, you know, 8 vocals stems to Con the Artisan, I started to, rather than be worried about, you know, be concerned about what was going to return to me after it had been arranged and further produced, I started to anticipate, thinking, oh, how are these tracks going to be layered? You know, what's next? Like how are the bridges going to be changed? Are the melodies going to be adapted? You know, are there going to be strings behind things? So it was an exciting process for me after a while, you know. So that was a privilege in itself, you know, having that comfort, that safety net behind things as well. Hopefully it shows through in the music as well.
Well, from what I've heard, So far, it definitely does. And is that you talked about you have a trilogy of albums coming out next year. Is that going to be
Yeah.
with Kong as well, or have you? Are you
No, that's it. So, like I was saying earlier, when Kong first reached out to me, I was in the final months of completing the doctorate thesis, and the doctoral thesis is a critical creative thesis in conjunction with an organization called Midlands Four Cities and a university called Nottingham Trent University. And so a critical creative thesis means in part it's dealing with critical analysis of artists outside of outside of England. So my critical analysis focuses on artists like Nas, Kendrick Lamar, Earl Sweatshirt, and some more emerging artists like Mike and Navy Blue and other artists in that ilk. And some of the literary or the technical literary devices that they utilize in order to show elements of vulnerability in their own lyrical content. The creative component of the thesis culminates as a trilogy of LPs. So,
okay?
they're all full-length LPs that all speak to each other in different ways. So whereas Canon is a full LP set in chapters, that literary concept or that literary theme is carried further now, where I really dig down into the three trilogy LPs. They all are very there's a concept called intertextuality, where it's like the way that I would explain it is when artists draw on each other's words to put emphasize more power in their own work, or if an artist was to speak about a character in another person's song, they're kind of intertextually engaging with that song in order to give further meaning to their own words. So my three albums they really engage with intertextuality and illusion, and as much as possible, every step of the way, they try to draw on authors, texts, movies, audio books, other sonic elements like records, etc., in as much detail as possible in order to create this new idea, that a new platform for rap music. Hopefully, I guess that's probably, yeah. So that's what I've tried to do anyway. I've tried to incorporate this literary element as much as possible, um, in order to further emphasize, that idea that rap music is a literary art form, and to hopefully foreground that as much as possible. So yeah, deeply cerebral, my most complex work. I'm very proud of the trilogy, which will be released in 2024, over the summer of 2024. Hopefully it will complement and build on the legacy that Canon is in the process of making for my career.
Now, speaking of building upon and the trust that you've now learned kind of to embrace that you've with Kong the Artisan, is it kind of opened up a little bit because you're saying that you're aloof and you kind of step back a bit? Has this kind of allowed you to perhaps going forward after these next three albums are
Oh,
released?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. Just being able to speak to you and to other people on podcasts and having interviews, it's something I should have embraced a long time ago, but maybe I just wasn't ready, but now I feel like I was saying previously about a track like Difference, and just having something to give now. How can I make a difference? It asks that question. How can I make a difference? Right now, I feel like at this moment, perhaps I'm making a difference for somebody if they're listening in, and they might have similar ideas about literature and rap, and they might, put two and two together, and maybe they'll build a project from some of the inspiration that I might be given. So it's, yeah, I feel like at the moment, it's a real privilege to be able to speak about my art form and to be 44 and still feel like I've got more to give, wisdom-wise, technique-wise. You know, I still feel like when I listen to my recent work, I still feel like I've got something relevant to say. And, you know, just in the past 6 months of my life, I've had a lot of transitional changes, and I feel like more than ever, I have a capacity now to really engage with music like I never have before. So that's like engaging with elements of live music, different genre, you know, writing for other people. I want to collaborate. I want to be part of that collaborative process where I'm writing for others, producing for others, you know, embodying different characters, thinking about different ways I can approach music as a whole, you know. So I feel in the next, you know, if I've got a 6-year plan, you know, I've got a set of albums that I want to release. And over that time period, hopefully I'll get the freedom of time to be able to leave, you know, something substantial behind where I can really articulate it and really talk about it and make it clear about my intentions. But yeah, I'm excited about what I might be able to achieve in the next few years if I really keep myself engaged with music, and if I really keep learning from the greats. And you know, the possibilities don't end, you know. It's so hopefully, you know, that idea of just you know, narrowing down and thinking about my cadence of voice, like, you know, thinking any aspect of the art form, you know, just the sung voice, the grain of the voice, you know, those things, and just adapting and pivoting and changing and developing. And yeah, I've got several ideas for the future that I hope will come to fruition, especially in relation to that idea of narrative arcs and music as literature and vice versa. I think, you know, taking the medium of rap and presenting it further, you know, trying to present it in a different form than has been done before, so to speak, hopefully. Because I was talking to somebody recently, and we were talking about that idea of like locating yourself. So the danger that I was so the danger that I have is that I locate myself too much because my accent is so broad, and I always speak about being from Nottingham. That's me in a nutshell. I can't change, or can I?
Mm.
You know, because when you read something on paper, the author might have a very broad accent, but you can't tell that. You just read it, and you perhaps read it in your own accent, or you imagine an accent. So how do I negotiate that idea of locating myself too heavily? So that's a thought that I have to think about going forward. How do I almost dodge that stereotype or that stigma of being from the Midlands, and how do I engage, you know, further with people around the world where, you know, the accent, the class, the race is not a barrier anymore, you know, thinking about those things, trying to make it as universal as possible. And that might be where collaboration comes in. You know, I write the words, but somebody else says them. So it might be that time, you know, it might be about that time to try and develop on that side of things. But yeah, we'll have to see how time will tell.
Well, man, I'm so happy that we're able to do this. I enjoyed this so much. I guess the last thing I want to know is whether or not you have any shows or anything coming up that you're gonna be doing.
Yes. Yeah, I'm unsure how things like this work, but if it comes out before January, we have the launch at Rough Trade Nottingham. We have the Canon album launch on January the 12th, Friday, January the 12th. So yeah, if you can get there, then
Well, my plan is to have, because this is I consider this very much a gift to me, and I think that a lot of my subscribers, I mean, they hold you in very high regard. So my plan was to release this Christmas Day. So if anyone happens to be,
wow, that's
yeah,
crazy.
Because I know some people will be alone and stuff as well. So if they want to have the ability to sit down and watch on
Man,
Christmas Day, they can.
that means a hell of a lot. You know, that's a lot of the, you know, some of the sentiment in Canon speaks to that. So yeah, that would be a really important. So thank you for thinking about those elements. Yeah, no, that means a lot.
Wonderful. Well, hey, you guys mean a lot to me, and what you do mean a lot to me as well. Like I said, you're a legend, man. I appreciate you for doing this, and
No, I appreciate
everything.
you. I appreciate you for, you know, for putting out the videos and reacting to my lyrical content, you know, and I think it opens up so many doors for us from the UK, you know, you doing that. So thank you for your, you know, your conviction and your, you know, your resolution and staying on point and keeping on putting out the videos and just showing that perspective. So thank you for doing that.
No, you're very welcome, man. Best music on the planet.
Thank you for your dedication. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, buddy. If have a Merry Christmas and best to you and yours.
Yes, have a good holiday season and Happy New Year. And thanks again for the opportunity.
Thanks, brother. Talk to you soon.
Take care.